Thank you, Claude, for joining me today for this important discussion on the topic of what's transpiring on the India-China border. We always think of India Pakistan, but now we're talking about the LAC more, the skirmishes there, and whatever transpired that has become quite serious, led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers. And then we have the COVID-19 going on. Obviously, everybody's focused on that, and we will be talking, everybody's talking about the new order change that coronavirus has brought. A new world is emerging, whatever the shape and form of that would be. But how are you seeing from your vantage point from Australia about what has transpired on the LSC and the different events that are surrounding there? How are you seeing it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this meeting, Arif. It's great to see you again. I haven't seen you for a long time, face to face, or virtually, that is.
Yes.
Look, the way I see it is that really there were two triggers for the recent developments in Ladakh. I would separate them into two. One is sort of a more localized reason, and the other one is the broader geopolitical reason. The local reason, the way I see it, is that the Chinese certainly weren't very happy with India's decision recently to upgrade a feeder road to its main road there, referred to as a DSDBO road. A DSDBO road is a very important road. It allows the Indians to provide supplies, military hardware, food, that sort of stuff, to its post in the Shangan region, which is, of course, a disputed area with Pakistan. And the Chinese haven't liked this at all, and this is why this is my understanding, they've moved in. There's a bit of dispute as to whether or not the Chinese have actually taken some sort of real estate, if you want to call that, land on the Indian side of the LAC or not, or they did temporarily, or they've come back. The fact is, it's clear that the Chinese want to push the LAC, the line of actual control, which is actually a strange term, given that there's actually no actual control and there's no line, but that's what they refer to as the LAC. They clearly want to push the LAC further to the west and to basically nibble away at Ladakh, which is, of course, a disputed area between India and China. So that's the local reason why the Chinese have moved in. They have, of course, got the military initiative in this whole sort of event, which has been going on since May. And as we know, in military operations, if you have the initiative, you pretty much have the upper hand. So as far as I see now, is that the Indians have been caught completely unawares about what happened. They are now playing catch-up game. And my understanding is they're sending quite a bit of hardware now to Ladakh, the Indians that is, to counter the Chinese military buildup on their side of the LAC. So that's what's happening locally, okay? There's still a lot of things happening there, but the reason that it's not clear what's happening there is because obviously it's very remote. CNN is not crawling all over the place, so there's no footage. And when there's no footage and film, it's very difficult to sell it on television. So that's at the local level.
Now, if I may interrupt, Claude, how do you take the other narrative that's also there, that the changing of the status of Kashmir and the cessation of the emergency status, change and other steps India has taken to
Well,
change, and which
that was my
included. Please go ahead.
yeah. That was my second reason. So there was, as I mentioned, there was the sort of the local reason, but the more greater geopolitical reason is exactly what happened on the 5th of August last year, when the Indian government, led by the BJP Prime Minister Modi, decided to change the status of Kashmir. When I talk about Kashmir, I'm talking about the whole J&K, Jammu and Kashmir, which of course involved Ladakh as well. And what happened there, as we all know, as your listeners would know, Modi changed the status of Kashmir, then removed the autonomous status of Kashmir, decided to split Kashmir into two union territories. One is Jammu and Kashmir, and the other one, of course, is Ladakh. And of course, this then goes directly into Chinese interest, because as far as China is concerned, it has interest in Ladakh because it actually claims part of it. And of course, it's just next door to another part of Ladakh, which is, of course, Aksai Chin. And so that's all sort of combined. And this is one of the geopolitical reasons why China has reacted today, and that's to counter what Modi did on the 5th of August last year. So that's one of the major reasons. And there are several other irritants that's really bothered the Chinese. And for example, my understanding is Amit Shah, the Home Minister of India, decided that they would take back Aksai Chin, which, as we know, the Indians lost in 1962 in this brief war between the two, which was a very bloody affair. And statements like of that ilk from the Indians really is like a red rag to President Xi, as you can well imagine. And so things like that just really irritated China. And I suspect that this whole military development, although there hasn't really been much military fighting, it's been actually almost medieval with the soldiers fighting each other in a brutal way. But as far as President Xi is concerned, he feels that this whole 5th of August change of status, statements by the various political leaders in India goes against the whole Wuhan consensus of 2018, when, India and the Chinese decided to have these sort of informal meetings and to try to make sure that the bilateral relationship between these two giants could be sort of ironed out and there would be no friction. But of course, that's not what's happened. Sorry, go on.
And then the other linked narrative is now how it's playing out. The narratives is that India is projecting it as Chinese aggression and assertion that its wider role, whether it be Taiwan, Hong Kong, or its behavior in the Indo-Pacific, the South China Sea, etc. On the other hand, in the South Asia, or maybe even Pakistan and China, they're projecting it as India is isolated. It's not having good relations with any of its neighbor, have border disputes. Burma, Nepal have been mistreated, etc. And both are kind of projecting other as the. And what's your assessment in the sense of this wider narrative game?
Well, the way I see it as well, and I think we touched on that a bit. I think is that the other reason is that the reason why let me just bring this down this blind. Sorry, it's a bit
getting in your eyes, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is better. Is that the second reason? And it comes to my second point about geopolitical reason why the Chinese have done what they've done at the point they've done it, is the whole India's rapprochement or membership of the so-called Quad, the quadrilateral. I would not even call it a coalition. It's a grouping of four countries: the United States, India, Japan, and Australia. And it's very much, no one wants to say it officially, but it's pretty much focused against China. You will never read it anywhere, but that's the way it is. And the India and the Chinese, of course, don't like this. And one of the things they want to do is they've seen that India is getting closer to, especially countries like Australia, which is also part of the Quad. And one of the purposes, I suppose, of what they did in Ladakh is to try to teach them a lesson, the Indians, that be careful, don't get any funny ideas. We are here, we are your next door neighbor, because the big difference with the other Quad leaders is that India is the only other country of the four that actually has a long border with China, which of course will make it have a different view about its approach to the Quad, but also with China being next door, it can actually pretty much put much more pressure on India than it could on the other three members. So I think that one of the messages of China in doing this whole Ladakh thing is to say, look, we're here, we know what you're doing with the Quad, and don't get any funny ideas.
All right. And now here, Claude, Claude, you have been writing a lot about the Kashmir, and you kind of suggesting and proposing a model as well, that how it could be resolved at this juncture. In light of COVID, in light of these recent developments, do you still see hope, or that there could be amicable solution of Kashmir under the circumstances? How are you viewing it now? I know some of those thoughts were before it, but now these other events have since transpired.
I think excuse me, I think the problem is that both of them, the COVID-19 issue, which is far from being finished or over with, that's for sure, and of course what's happening in Ladakh, have really complicated things. Because really one should, although all this is happening in the same neck of the wood, it's all about J&K, which of course Ladakh is part of it. It's really, what's happening in Ladakh is about a piece of real estate. And when we talk about Kashmir, and when we talk about the Kashmiris, and it's about the right of self-determination. So that's two very different issues. One is about real estate and who gets which bits. Should Pakistan get a bit? Should India have a bit? Should China have a bit? And then there's a whole thing about self-determination, particularly of the Muslims in the Kashmir Valley, which is basically where everything's happening. So when people talk Kashmir, they're really focused on that. But having said all that, I think what's happening now with the COVID-19 and Ladakh and the Chinese and in that whole area has complicated any attempt at resolution. Not that the Indians were actually ever interested in trying to resolve it. As far as they're concerned, it's a domestic issue and remains so. I don't think so. I think it's now he has, by having the 5th of August, scrapping of Article 370, he has put it on the international sort of public domain. But, and I do think eventually there will be negotiations, but I think now there will be pushed back, I think, until the Ladakh issue is sort of settles down, and until we can actually have more face-to-face meetings again. I think it makes it very, very difficult. So I think it has put back the cause of the Kashmirs, I think, but I don't think they should give up yet.
All right. And now getting to a little bit of bigger picture, in terms of Chinese strategic intent at this point, obviously sitting in the Washington, D.C., it's being viewed differently. There is this didn't happen today. The trajectory has been going on. Is China in the post-COVID-19 or whatever stage of coronavirus we are in right now, do you think they have made some assessment that since everybody is distracted, reassessing their strategies and positions, because obviously the economy of every nation has been impacted, and it has yet to come out to what extent they have been damaged or not, and how they are going to adjust in the future. That they have made some calculation that, okay, this is the time to assert in different parts of where they're think their interests are at stake?
Yeah, no, the big question. I think yeah, it is a big question. I think you're absolutely right. I think the Chinese are, without any doubt, flexing their muscles everywhere, whether it's in Taiwan, whether it's with Korea. There are, of course, disputes there. Definitely in the South China Sea, and of course, Ladakh, and of course, as well, Hong Kong. So they have a whole multitude of issues they are pressing on. Okay. Now, why is it doing it now? There could be a number of reasons. There's a lot of internal issues in the CCP and the way the whole coronavirus issue began. And we know that there was a 3-week gap before it actually all came public. And it's a 3-week gap, which my understanding, if the whole world had known about it earlier, would have saved a lot of people's lives. And of course, the various the economic situation of the world. So, is this a diversion? Possibly, but I think they can see an opportunity here to press some of their points in all these different areas I told you about. I think it's a very difficult issue. You will notice coming back to Australia, where I'm sitting now, we are pushing back. I'm not sure if you've heard, but just yesterday, the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, decided that we would allow Hong Kong students to stay here in Australia in light of the national security law that was just passed in China, which basically scraps the one country, two systems. And we've decided to allow Hong Kong students to stay in Australia an extra 5 years after they've done their degrees, with a pathway to permanent residency and eventually, I suppose, citizenship. This was very, very poorly received in China, as you can well imagine, saying that this is interference in domestic politics and whatever else. I don't see how that is an interference, quite frankly. But we're not the only ones doing this. Other countries are pushing back. Canada is another one doing it. New Zealand is. And everyone actually is starting to see the true colors of the CCP-run China. And what will happen, we're not sure. As you know, the Americans have sent 2 battle groups, 2 aircraft carriers into the South China Sea this week. I'm very worried that eventually there will be some sort of accident, and who knows what will happen. The fact is, and most analysts would agree, I would suspect the South China Sea has been lost and is now effectively a Chinese lake. And we're still trying to very much say that this is an international waters and that we should be able to go through it. But I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to be able to claim that that's international waters. And I'm not sure where all this is going to end, because this is all coming together at the same time as the Americans and what's happening with President Trump. Will he get reelected? America first. There's less interest in the United States being in this neck of the woods. And this is where the Quad comes in, where there's a feeling that, well, is America's political will still there to be here? Because, as you know, in Australia, we depend very heavily on protection from the United States, and certainly having nuclear umbrella. You know, as you know, we have a very big country, very small population, lots of minerals under the ground, and it's very difficult to protect. And so we need outside help. We're not sure if we can completely rely then on simply the United States, given what I've just said before. And this is where the Quad, we think we're starting, some people are talking about, let's have a Quad which includes, as I said, the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, which is a coalition then, not so much a coalition, a military coalition, probably more a diplomatic coalition, because as you know, when you have a military coalition, it becomes more and more difficult to make sure that all coalition members align and have the same alignment. So how useful will it be? I'm not sure. But certainly the fact that we're talking and we're having various military sort of exercises together does show that we are concerned here, the democracies in this region, and we want to try to do something about trying to push back the Chinese.
So coming back to the India-China border and what has taken place over there, in your eyes, is this incident going to push India more towards the Quad alliance now? And then they would have to, because India has had a, I would say like a strategic confusion. On one hand, they're also in the BRICS, which we don't hear a lot about these days. They went and joined the Shanghai SEO Cooperation Organization. And at the same time, they're also in the Quad and the Indo-Pacific. So it seems like there has been a confusion, and that may be the cause of the issues that India is facing right now.
I think you're right. I think the Indians must feel a bit schizophrenic now, because the fact is, the BRICS is not going to do very well. I'd hate to be there at the next meeting with the Chinese and Indians there. I'm not even sure if the Indians will still be going. I'm not even sure if the meetings will be taking place. That's one thing. The same thing with the Shanghai Cooperation Coalition there. Again, I think it will be very, very awkward. So having said that, I think it will be pushing the Indians more into the Quad camp. But having said that, the Indians have got a tradition of not wanting to be formally part of any sort of grouping, and which it makes sense. There's a historical reasons, as we know, the Third World Movement and that sort of stuff after after the Second World War, but also because they clearly want to keep their options open. As I said before, if they go too openly and overtly towards the Quad coalition, the Chinese could just pounce on them. I mean, there's absolutely no comparison between the Chinese military and the Indian military. Absolutely no comparison. The only thing the Indians could be good at militarily is that as part of a coalition, they could contribute something. But the basic bottom line for China and the whole Indian Ocean and India is to keep India boxed in South Asia, keep it busy, keep its attention in basically on the land, but away from the Indian Ocean, so that the Chinese can be busy, increase their presence in the Indian Ocean, as we know in the Western Indian Ocean, and also of course in Djibouti, and keep them boxed in. And this is why Pakistan comes in, and you will notice that Pakistan has been extremely quiet over this whole Ladakh situation. They need to say nothing. They can just watch, because of course, as far as China is concerned, Pakistan is a force multiplier for China with the whole CPEC. And this is where Ladakh is important. And this DSDBO road I was telling you about, is that that road allows the Indians then to go into the Siachen region, which is of course all very close to Gilgit-Baltistan, which is where CPEC assets go through. And by what the Chinese have done, they're basically protecting their growing assets in that neck of the woods. And it pretty much tells the Indians, look, your complaints about us as Chinese going through this still contested area of Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, well, it's none of your business anymore. And if you do create any problems, we'll just pounce on you. And basically, Chinese are saying, it's one thing for you, India, to beat up on Pakistan, but with us, it's going to be another ballgame.
Lastly, Claude, now that we have discussed the Pacific side of it, and you can't just leave out the Middle East, you kind of think that's and I know that's an area of your interest as well, but we don't usually connect the two. Now that if there is assertiveness and if there is on the part of Chinese, are we going to see something on that side of the neck of the wood, so to say? We've heard kind of Chinese footprints on, with Israel partnership is increasing, and there is, I guess it's a far-fetched assertion that could they have a role in the Middle East peace process as well if they are slowly, increasing their influence.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting you asked that question, because just a couple of days ago, I was reading that the Chinese-Iranian relationship is growing a lot, to the point that there's rumors, now whether or not this is true or not, but the Iranians are thinking of allowing the Chinese to build some sort of base on one of their islands in the Persian Gulf. Now, that would be an incredible development if that were to happen. Now, of course, in many ways, Mr. Trump has pushed Iran more and more into the Chinese hands with the scrapping of the Iran in the nuclear deal, that sort of stuff, regardless of what one thinks of the nuclear deal. But it has pushed the Chinese, the Iranians into the Chinese hands. And this would all come together as well, because there's a CPEC to Pakistan, Iran's next door to Pakistan. There could be a linkage there. And I think, and I've said this before, not everyone agrees, but I really believe that India is going to be squeezed out of all of this. And I think the Chinese are muscling in on there, and with Pakistan, obviously pretty much in the Chinese orbit completely. But if it can bring Iran into that orbit, that'll be a big plus for the Chinese. As for the rest of the Middle East, the Arabian Gulf and all that, again, the relationship varies. It's touch and go. It's very difficult to know where that would go. There's certainly one thing that the Saudis and their allies on the peninsula wouldn't like, is to see too close of a relationship between Iran and China, because don't forget, Iran and Saudis are, of course, competitors in that whole area. Sure. As to Israel and China, I'm not sure how far China would get involved in the whole, can we even call it a peace process? It hasn't been peace in so many years. So I don't think they're going to get involved in that area. They've got their hands full somewhere elsewhere, the Chinese, so I don't think they'd want to get involved in that.
Well, thank you very much, Claude, for your time and for your insights. We've covered a broad area, and we'll definitely have more discussions, but thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Arif. It was a pleasure talking to you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.